Hello and welcome to another edition of Relatable. I am your host, Stephanie Michele. Today we're going to be talking about racism. I am going to share a story that illustrates the effect of racism. And if you're watching on Facebook Live and you want to share about how you've been affected by racism via the comments, let us talk, let's work that out. So here's my story. This happened about a month ago. I see this attractive man in Whole Foods. His smile and energy reminds me of Will Smith. And I like Will Smith, so I want to compliment him with this realization, but I stop myself. I instantly wonder, will he think I'm some stupid white lady that think all black men look the same? I walk home in my discomfort. Did I really just deny myself and this person a compliment that we might have both have enjoyed? And what if I was a little uncomfortable for a moment? I can't begin to imagine his life as a black man, what it's been like. When I can only talk about racism, he's experienced it. He's experienced unfair treatment, policies, and straight up hate. Isn't a little moment of potential embarrassment or discomfort worth it as to say, I know what's been created to control and divide us, but screw that. Let's just connect even if it's just for this moment. If you're thinking right now, did this white woman just share a story about her trip to Whole Foods to talk about racism? Yeah, I did. And here's why. Because people who are watching that have hate in their heart will transfer that onto me regardless of the color of my skin or theirs. Out of all the binary topics we could talk about, black, white, liberal, conservative, male, female, gay, straight, right, wrong, I wish we could collectively agree that love is better than hate and work together towards healing the hate on a personal level. Why? Because the very same systems that make sure racism is thriving don't stop there. They look for other ways to control and keep us busy and distracted, fighting over what divides us so we miss everything else that's going on. Who do you think benefits from keeping people in their pain and hate? Greedy people. They're in our government, they're in our financial system, health, education, religion, and entertainment institutions. Greedy people know if they can control you, they can make money off of you. These people hate all forms of woke people, which include people who seek therapy, therapists who are not quick to prescribe pharmaceuticals, alternative medicine advocates and users, self-helpers, activists, artists, anti-hate thought leaders, and spiritual people. Even if I didn't believe it was completely possible to eradicate hate and things like racism, I would still work towards it. Because as one person stands up, more people do. There's always an opportunity to shift things for the better good, for each other, for yourself, and if you can't do it alone, there are people who want to be there for you, that want better things for you. In my vulnerability with this man at Whole Foods, I forgave myself for not doing better in that moment, but I won't forget, and I'll work towards having more courage the next time. I am hoping today's show is an example of that courage. Neither my guest or I are qualified to speak about the experience of racism, but we can talk this out. As we talk this out, we are encouraging others to have these types of uncomfortable conversations. So let's meet our guest. GioVana is a holistic psychotherapist and intuitive energy alchemist. She believes that there is a need and opportunity for humankind to evolve and raise our vibration of being conscious, which she calls higher living. GioVana holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from NYU. She has been featured over the years on various global telesummits, wellness expos, local television, and radio. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I am too. Before we dive into the topic that we're going to talk about today, I always let the guests kind of clear out anything that's been distracting them or like just something that they want to share. Maybe it's something about what I just talked about. Do you have anything that comes up before we get into our conversation?
You mean regarding racism?
Just kind of anything
or
that might be
bad drivers I experienced on the freeway.
Yeah, it could be that.
That's what first came to mind.
Yeah, like anything that you just need to get out of your head so we can talk and have a meaningful conversation.
I don't think so. I think we'll let it flow.
Okay. All right. So first question, so when we talked and there could have been so many different things that we could have talked about today just based on the short conversation that we had. Why did you want to talk about racism? Why was it important to you?
Because I think, well, right now it's up in a lot of our faces in the majority, especially with the royal wedding that just happened.
Yeah.
So it's being brought up in the collective consciousness for healing at this time. Everything is being magnified that needs to heal.
Yeah.
I'll say heal.
Yeah.
I look at it as more light needs to be brought into these situations. So I thought it was a very timely subject.
Well, even before the wedding, really, too, right?
Yes.
You know, I mean, I think if anything, if we can say anything about our country and the state that our country is in, racism is a much bigger deal than most people would have liked to have thought. Like,
yeah, right. And what I think is good is that this was a positive. The royal wedding was a positive happening, instead of, you know, talking about what happens with policemen and, you know, the murdering that's happening of people that they're going to arrest or whatever it may be. At least this was something that's bringing more positivity and connectedness. So I thought that was really great. So it's a great way to bridge both, you know, together, looking at it from both sides.
Did you watch it? Did you watch the royal wedding?
Some of it, yeah. Some of it. It's, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get up at 5 a.m., but I did watch it too. All right. Well, so let's just talk about, you know, things that are damaging in this topic. So, like, you know, there's words and there's actions that are racist, right? So, what type of words do you believe, you know, are really damaging when we talk about racism? Like,
words? Well, I mean, you know, the obvious words of labeling someone that, you know. I think that to come at this, because you know they look at everything from a metaphysical, spiritual perspective, and I think that the trigger needs to be taken out of these things. Where there's no trigger, there's no wound. That's what I always tell my clients. Whenever there's a trigger, that means there's a wound there to be healed, and this is a huge collective wound that I think. I think that people need to take their power back from this. And this, you know, I don't think we have a long enough time on this show to really get into what I'm talking about, but I think it's exacerbated in we talked about this before when we were on the phone about victim consciousness. And I think that's where a lot of it still is. All the energy is in the victim consciousness. And going into history and keep perpetuating the slavery stories in our films and all the bad things that are happening and the negative things that are happening. There's so much good that's happening too, but those don't sell movie tickets.
yeah.
But they don't perpetuate that victim consciousness, because I think if people don't get through that, the only way, you know, over something is through it, and get these proverbial chips off the shoulder to stop expecting these things and that they'll always be labeled certain ways. You know, then because we attract what we feel we are.
Yeah, but I don't think that, well, I can't speak for black people because obviously I'm not black, but I know some of this is not about just our people were enslaved. It's what their daily experience is like.
Yes.
You know, things like, you know, if you or I go to a hotel, we check into a hotel and all the toiletries are meant for our hair type, you know, we expect that. You know,
that's a great point.
Yeah, they don't get those things. They don't get Band-Aids that are the color of their skin. They're not going to be pulled over because they have a hoodie, or I'm not going to get pulled over because I have a hoodie up. You know, like there's things that I believe, again, can't speak for everybody, but people are experiencing injustices right now as we have this conversation. I agree that, yes, you can lean into being victimized, but if something is happening every day and you don't get to talk about that, you know, you don't get to say, hey, this happens, guys. This is a part of our daily living, you know. You're definitely going to have that's definitely going to affect how you experience the world. You're going to experience it as being unfair. You know it's unfair. If you have an ethic, if your name sounds like you're black, you might not get interviewed, or you might get different rates on a mortgage loan. Like there's all kinds of things that are happening right now that is not about like the history of their ancestors. I know that some people would say that, you know, so, you know, how do we, I mean, I think, you know, this is why I knew that this conversation would be uncomfortable, because we're not having these experiences. We can talk to friends and hear their experiences, but you and I are not having these experiences. So, you know, how can we white women, or, you know, we have these conversations, or say, I hear you, or do things that help them out of this? You know, I think that is a good place to, you know, to start and talk about. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, understanding, empathy, openness, asking questions, not presuming or assuming, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, we can all come at it from our different levels of perspective and professionalism, what stories we want to tell, what we want to focus on, that kind of thing. I mean, I grew up in a smaller city, and there were different types of people. There were African American, there was a Portuguese family that lived across the street, and then I had my friends, and my father was prejudiced. But I understood why, because not that I approved it, because I never was. I went over a girl's house one time and I got in trouble, and I didn't understand why. Why did I get in trouble for going over this girl's house? I didn't go to school with her. I went to a Catholic school. Yeah. But it was because she was African American. And so I asked my father about that. And what was interesting was we had this most amazing couple across the street who were African American, and they were older, and they were lovely, and they took care of their yard and their land, and it was very nice, and my father liked them. Then we had this family next door who, you know, they were throwing garbage over the fence. My father bought the piece of land next door and put this fence up because, you know, I understood where his anger was coming from, because it was happening around. And I think that that's another thing that we need, and it goes to education.
Well, yeah, because so in that example, and I think this is great. This is part of the conversation we need to have. In that example, you have an example of a black family that your father likes and one that he doesn't.
And why?
And yes, but
they stole my toys and my puppy.
Yeah,
and
but that's just that's a characteristic and a behavior of a human being that just happens to be black. But if he had a prejudice against all black people in those two situations, like that is, you know, that's unfair, right? Because you could just as easily, that neighbor could have been white, and throwing trash over. You know? And would he have had the same, like, well, all white people throw trash over?
Well, he would have had the same reaction. Yeah, he wouldn't have liked opportunity.
Them. He wouldn't have liked them, but he wouldn't have had the same reaction to you going to the black girls' home.
Right, exactly. And then, you know, these are uncomfortable because stereotypes exist for a reason. I'm Italian American. Now, you know the stereotypes of some Italians, the Guidos. Like, what was that reality television show? I don't know the name, but those
Jersey
were
Shore.
Something. Yeah. You know, that's a type of that I'm not really proud to say about, but it exists, and it's okay. Like, if someone were to call me Guidette, I think the name is. It does, because I know who I am, and I think that's what's so important, is when children are in school, to have education, to really teach children who they are, to have a fundamental core belief system in place of who they are as a human being and what they're here on this planet to be and do, and the fundamental rights, you know, that they have. And so because I have that strong core, it wouldn't matter to me if I was labeled, if, you know, they said, oh, your family's in the mafia, or whatever the stereotypes are. I've had, if you want to say reverse racism, you know how there's reverse snobbery? I remember in college, I was in a class, and the best thing that I could have ever done was to move to New York City in my early 20s, because it's a melting pot of people, and I loved that. Because we moved from the house I was telling you about, and we moved to a town where it was predominantly white people, and I found it so boring, you know, and so I loved moving to New York. I've never really, my friends, my social circles have never been prejudiced. The people that I've been around, they haven't. And so it's still mind-boggling to me when I see these things that happen in the news, or I read these things that are still going on. Like, really, people were still having this happen at this time?
Yeah.
And so what is the answer? You know, what is the answer to do? And so for me, it's like helping people to raise their consciousness, to evolve.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure, on some levels. Back to, I think what was the experience that you felt like it was reverse racism?
Oh, right, in college, and I've had this happen more times, but there were 2 African-American girls in the class, and you know, we had a great class. It was very interactive, where we spoke with each other, but they just didn't like me. They didn't know me, but they were just placing, oh, you know, she's this, this, and this.
See, so I've experienced that too. I mean, I'm as white as they come from the Midwest, like, you know, and I have experienced people like, oh, there's no way you're going to understand me. Look at you. I would call that a social prejudice, not reverse racism.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and why?
And other things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why? I think because racism to me is more of like a systematic. Like, there are things being done, policies. You know, how we criminalize people of color that are done against this race. And so to say reverse racism, I'm like, well, that's not. No, that system is not doing that to us.
Yeah.
But I can definitely say that people of other colors have social prejudice against us. I mean, I live in downtown Los Angeles, where there's a huge population of homeless people, and you know, unfortunately, a lot of them are black men. And I will be walking, and you know, I'll watch 3 young men, or you know, a couple men, black men, walk by a homeless person. He won't ask them for money, but he'll definitely ask me for money, because in his mind, and I get it, my life probably is better than theirs, definitely his if he's homeless, but than the other men that walked by, and so he's gonna ask me, and that's more of I think a social prejudice than it's not racism that he asked me.
Assumptions, stereotypes.
Yeah,
again,
yes,
it's the
those
same
things
thing.
for sure, but I think it's important for us to like, yeah, this stuff exists, but there's definitely a difference. There's a difference between those 2 situations.
And in those situations, we can relate, because there are many times where many of us are treated a certain way.
Yes.
Because of how we look, or how we act, or how we talk, or how we dress, or whatever it is.
Yes.
And it can be negative.
Yes. And I think that like that's the part why we can talk about this. Like, if there's anything that we can do, that anybody can do, that's like, yeah, I look around and I see some things that are unfair, you know, that are really terrible, that are complete injustices. And if we take the time to stop and relate and like, tell me more, listen, I think listen, we both talked about this, like, you know, really listening and not assuming like, well, you've told a story and I can relate to that story, but maybe there's details in that story that I can't relate to, and you know, tell me more. You know, tell me more so I can kind of, you know, so I can be there with you, so I can understand. I liked, and I think I'm going to share it. There was a video. There's a video called "What Your Black Friend Wants You to Know." A cute little cartoon that was made, and there were some things in there that like really. I was like, yeah, I could do that more. You know, like standing up and saying things, because if they say it. It's not going to be heard in the same way if I said something. If I notice something that's been done to somebody and it's unfair, and that person happens to be a black person, my black friend could say, hey, that's unfair, but it doesn't have the same energy if I say it, right? And like, I think that's some of the things that, you know, we could do, you know, if we care about relating, and we're connected based on our humanity, you know, just our basic, we're part of this like human race, like we can slow down. And I think in generally speaking, no matter what topic we're talking about, we do need to slow down and like connect and talk to people about stuff and hear their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I was getting to before about the slavery concept brought up, it's in the DNA and in the ancestral lineage of a lot of people, and that's what needs to be cleared out, because even if they're not thinking about that aspect of it consciously, it's still there in the behavior patterns, in the subconscious mind, and so it will affect the confidence and self-esteem of people.
How would they go about clearing it out?
Well, that's, yeah, I mean, that takes someone who is very responsible for self and wants to become as whole a person as possible and integrated.
Yeah.
So, you know, to seek out assistance and just being mindful of it. I mean, there's so many books out there and so many things online if someone doesn't want to see a therapist or a counselor or a healer.
And I suspect it's not like, you know, like anything, like, you know, a lot of things that happen in our childhood. So if I just talk about my own life cycle from baby to this age right now, you know, there's things that have happened that I need to unlearn, but there's also things that I just need to connect to and use that for something. So, you know, there's definitely, I mean, slavery is a part of Black people's story, you know, so it's like there's something, like you don't want to remove your story, you want to connect to it and find a way to, you know, do something with it, but also move beyond that, you know, it's like this is the thread, this is who I am, now what else can I do, you know, I think.
But I think that's important what you just said, because is it their story? Is it their story anymore? I think that we need to let go of these and just move on to say, I understand where you're coming from, but this is where it brings, like when you say that, it's heavy. Yeah. It's a denser energy and it brings people down. Yeah. And
well, would you, you know, is your story, do you know how far back your ancestors go? Do you know when they came to the US? Like, would you ever want to, have you done that research on what, Ancestry.com or?
That gets into a whole galactic conversation. So it's very different than just my family lineage, because we aren't just our family lineage. We are many things. Yeah. You know, so I look at it from a very different perspective. So
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying.
And we've all been, see, this is why if people start to open up their minds to these kind of things, we've all been everything. You know, we've all been everything and experienced so many different things. So that's why if people try to segregate themselves, it's like, you've been that too. You know, but it gets into, do people believe in other, you know, past lives and other life experiences, and how do we treat animals? I mean, they're living beings too. Yeah. You know,
so what I'm hearing you say, and I don't want to put words in your mind, but this is what's coming up for me when you say this, is the way out of some things that are not serving us is to connect to more of the spiritual view, like the bigger picture, to let like fullness, every experience like come into you, because if we probably can relate on many different levels if we are not just focused on one. You know, there's opportunity to connect to many different people, things, animals, if we open that up.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I don't like to use the word unity consciousness because it sounds, you know, airy-fairy, but in essence.
What do you mean by that, unity consciousness?
Well, it's that we all come from the same creator source, if we want to call it God or the universe, whatever anyone wants to call that source. We all, everything is from that. And we just have chosen to have different experiences for different reasons. And that's the other thing. If somebody is alive in a body, there's a very good reason for that. And that's up to the person to really find out why. You know, and generally speaking, everyone is here to evolve and to have experiences in a human body. And so, you know, I always say, let's make the best of it and let's create harmony. I mean, we're meant to be in harmony with each other, not all this hate and segregation and, you know, all of that's happening.
Hate is so heavy.
It is.
Felt that sign. It's so heavy. And
it's not just, and you know, and being in Southern California, I mean, it's other places too, but we also have the racism with the Mexican population, right? And everything that's happening with our president and bringing up all of that. And that's an issue. It's an issue. And then there are very distinct, I can understand certain aspects of it, you know, and so there has to be a way to solve these. Balance and fairness and justice is so hard for our world, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said in the opening, I don't, you know, there's so many things that are going on right now in terms of the news that like just create nothing but trauma for me personally when I see it and go, God, that's going to take a lot of work to undo. And I'm not, what's the term, like Pollyanna, or like I'm not a Pollyanna enough to believe that we're all going to live in, you know, loving kindness with each other.
Not yet,
but
for a long time.
Yeah, but I do know that what I see is the most unfortunate thing, and this is what, you know, why I said what I said in the beginning, is not, I think binary things are meant to divide us. I think people that created racism, you know, did it in slavery. People that created slavery, it was a control thing. It was, you know, it was a greed thing. You know, that's how people built wealth, is they owned people in our country, right? I mean, that's pretty sick. And there's good people and bad people in all different races, and there's people that live in heart space and live in hate space, but hate space is bad. I mean, hate space creates something inside you that, you know, has now scientifically been proven to like create real illnesses. Like if you're holding stuff that's like poison, you know, it's not good for someone to hold hate against somebody else. Like they're not doing themselves a good thing to hold it against somebody else. So,
but it's inside them. It's it's projecting because that's how they feel about themselves, and it comes from fear.
Right. So I think the biggest way, and you know, so some, you know, I agree with some of the things you're saying. The biggest way that people of all races could go, fuck racism, is to go, you know what, I am going to work on myself and empower myself and love myself, and I'm going to reach out to people that came from something different than me and are a different race, and I'm going to explain this to them. I'm going to share my story with them, and we're going to move together. Like, you know, and I'm going to focus my energy on people that are working towards having more love in their space, because that's powerful.
Yes.
Hate, you know, it doesn't do great things.
That's a big wall to have to tear down. Yeah. So
I generally think that, you know, so if we go from a big level, I generally think, yeah, we all have to kind of work towards this, but I also don't want to brush over the fact that stuff happens in daily life. Stuff is happening right now outside on these streets that's unfair against people that are a different color than you and I. And I can't just tell those people to go love yourself like that. Like it's a bigger thing. Like I feel I have to do something too, you know, because if I believe and want us to raise our consciousness, I believe that it's a we that has to happen. It doesn't make a difference if I do this alone. It has to be a group of people. So to deny that stuff is happening, you know, we got to talk about it so we can go somewhere else together with it, I think, you know, instead of, okay, nobody gets through stuff by not talking about it or by not being honest about it or not examining their role in the situation. You know, so many different expressions around that. We have to go through the darkness to get to the light, or walk through the fire. You know, there's a bazillion different ways.
And the tangible parts of this are to make changes in social justice.
Yes.
And sectors of different government projects.
Yes.
Programs, assistance, education.
Yes.
Healthcare. I mean, it runs the gamut.
Yes.
Where these, and there are people doing this, but it's just it takes so long to change things. That's why I didn't become an attorney, because I'd be fighting the judicial system all the time, because it's not a fair system. It doesn't work in a lot of situations for the good of the people. And it's frustrating. Yeah. So I understand the frustration, and I understand the resentment. I'm not saying that I don't, I really do, and I feel it, you know, but and to make, it gets very overwhelming and frustrating.
Yeah. It can be. How else can we go with this?
But the thing that's interesting too is, you know, I think that the U.S. is a great example of unification, because there are so many, you know, immigrants that came here. My parents, grandparents came over on the Mayflower, and they integrated into society. You know, they worked, they paid taxes, they learned English, that type of thing. So I think that's an issue. you know, that we need to bring up. It's you know, it's okay for America to welcome people, but what we need to do, there needs to be a system in place, and for that to be honored and respected if people want to come here and live here and take advantage of what the U.S. has to offer. And that goes not just, I'm talking about all ethnicities.
True. So we can't have this conversation without talking about white privilege. We have to talk about that because this is part of it. What are your thoughts on that phrase? Or you're just like, I don't like this question.
No, it's from what area do I want to come at it from?
Yeah.
So when you say privilege, do you mean privilege in having a great education and money to have a great education, or what exactly?
I think for me, I mean, I don't think it's something that like I don't think it's something that you can get. Like, it's something that just happens. Like, so I don't know if we talked about this off the air or if we actually started talking about this already. You know, the experience that we have as a white person is very different, and we just come to accept it. Like, you know, if we go to a hotel, all the toiletries are for our hair type, or Band-Aids are our skin tone. Yeah, like things like that. That's, you know, it just happens. I mean, I've been places and I've tested this. I'll tell two stories. I mean, I've been places where that I've walked up to a counter at the same time as somebody else, and I got greeted first, and the other person happened to be another color. You know, I can't say it was just about that, but there's definitely things that happen in this world that I get different treatment than maybe a friend of mine that's a different color. I didn't ask for that. I'm not trying to take advantage of that, but it's real, you know? I witnessed not too long ago a neighbor, I'll never forget this. I was standing outside we have a little market in our building, and my friend, my black guy, was smoking a marijuana cigarette, okay? And I see this police officer on a bike who he must have smelled it, and my friend puts it down really quickly, and he's now coming over. Well, it could have been me. Like, I don't know if he saw who had it, but he instantly went to him, and not only did he go towards him, he slammed him up against the building. Now, I'm pretty sure if he thought that it was me, he wouldn't have physically put his hands on me and slammed me into the building. That was real to me. Like, I've heard things happen before.
Just for smoking?
Yes.
Well, he should have written him up or complained about that.
Yeah. But this is real. This stuff happens, and I'm not, you know, there's good, bad people.
Yeah.
There's people, again, I'd say the divide is like people that have love in their heart or people that have hate in their heart. There's good police officers, there's bad police officers, but the likelihood of me having an experience like that happening to me are very little, because there is a little privilege that goes along with my skin color, and that's real. I mean, it's not, again, I used to hate this phrase, and I really had to learn about it. I really thought, oh my God, anytime somebody brought it up, it was like, oh, geez, that just feels terrible. Like, I have to own that, you know? I don't have to own it. I'm not taking advantage of it, but it is a real thing that happens.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Well, you are white.
Yeah, I'm very white.
See, I don't relate to that term.
Yeah.
White. I don't consider myself a white woman. You know, when we have to fill out those forms, I'm like, I don't want to check that box.
Yeah.
Because I'm Italian American.
Yeah.
So I feel more Latin based than I do white.
Yeah.
You know, so when I moved to that town I was telling you about, where it was predominantly white families, I was always in the sun when I was little, so my skin was very dark, and they thought I was Indian. They thought I was Indian. But see, my experiences of all of that, they didn't have any ill feelings toward me because they thought that. And so it's interesting because I haven't had those same experiences that you're telling me that you've had. You know, with people, I've seen people treated very well. All different people around me. I'm not around that type of. I don't even hear people talking like that.
Yeah.
That I know in my group. Through the years, I've had many different groups, and because I move around a lot.
For sure, moving downtown Los Angeles has
Yes.
has opened me to
Yes.
those experiences. And I remember when I first got down here, I think I went out on a date with someone for the first time, and he was just so marveled that like a woman of my age would want to live downtown. He was like, "Isn't this what what you're supposed to do? Is have this career and then move away, and so nobody bothers you?" And I'm like, well. Yeah, but that's also part of like what is so polarizing about our country. We have all these little buckets, and we don't, visit, and we have for real bubbles that are happening, and we only have the experiences that we have within them. So I get that like not everybody would understand that. Not everybody wants to, get into a situation where they're not totally comfortable. For me, there's something about being in a place that is full of diversity that kind of, I don't know, I'm like feel very connected to things. Like it is, it's important to me. I don't know, but for sure I see more of it because of where I live, for sure. And so many more experiences. I'm on foot most of the time. Right. So I'm not in a car a lot. I'm like on foot walking with groups of people. So I do see things, and I look for them,
right.
Like I want to see what's going on. I want to feel connected to this world.
There is a lot of fear, and I'll use my sister as an example. I don't know that she'll see this, but
yeah,
I was living in New York City in the East Village, and it's become gentrified over the years, but this certain part still was kind of, sketchy.
Yeah.
Graffiti all over the place. There's still crime and such going on.
Yeah.
This is truth. It just is. There is, truth has no temperature.
Yeah.
It just is. It's how we project our feelings, whether inferior, superior, whatever it is, or just relating to something. But anyway, so she had to go to the ATM. So we pull over, and in front of the ATM was this big black man with a pit bull. And she wouldn't get out of the car to go to the ATM. And I'm like, what's the matter? And she said, I'm not going over there. Oh my goodness. I'm like, really? I get out of the car. I said, I will chaperone you and play bodyguard. And I went over and I just started talking to him. And he was the nicest man. And his dog was very sweet.
Yes.
But see, I don't have that ingrained in me. The fear. Now, I'm not stupid. I would assess the situation if if the dog was growling or he looked mean. I can tell by the energy,
right?
But my sister doesn't, so like I understand.
Yeah.
But and it was fine. And then, we were talking through the whole time she was doing her transaction. I said, see. Stop assuming.
And what comes up for me in that story too, because I'm I'm reflecting on an experience that I had with my only living grandmother in Michigan, like in the last couple of years when I went up for Thanksgiving, and she said something. I'm not gonna call her out on this but she said something that was pretty racist, and then in my mind I'm like, okay, that's where my dad gets it. That's where my uncles and my aunt, And hearing you and your sister have kind of a different experience, and I wonder what she would think about some of the things that you said about your father. What I'm thinking is like, there's so much unpacking that we have to do from our childhood and go, where did this come from? Like,
right.
Where are my thoughts coming from in my reaction to certain situations? And can I see things differently? Can I own this in a different way? Can I have my own experience? Or, can I allow myself to be a little bit vulnerable to learn too, instead of going, no, but I think it's helpful if there's one thing that we can say, if like people are watching and going, am I racist? Like, what was I taught about racism? It's to ask some of these questions. Like, do you remember a time that your parents did something and talked about a different race in a way that may have put a little dent in your mind that you need to like unpack a little bit and see what's there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's.
I think everyone has to unpack a lot of stuff from childhood, even if people had great childhoods. Because, I'm not going to say it's because of the parents, because it's not. There's always a rhyme and reason to everything, and we bring in what we choose to experience, and it gets triggered in our cellular memory by the age of 5.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even if you could have the most perfect parents, but it doesn't mean that that child will have the most easiest challenge-free life because the parents were great parents.
True.
So,
all right. you know, what else can we talk about? You know, if there's anything that I hope people are, if there's an experience that I hope people are having by watching this is giving people permission to be uncomfortable. Like, you know, I think this is an uncomfortable topic, especially for you and I to talk about. And it's not about having all the right answers, but I think it's about, you know, if you care about this, like if you feel like there's been injustices happening, and you know, and if you generally care about connecting with people, it's like having a dialogue with somebody, sitting down and listening to what someone of a different race has to say is like a good place to start. You know, yeah. What do you? I mean, if there was something that you'd want people to kind of take away from this conversation, what do you think?
I think to pull out of the collective and start with self, focus how to be the best person. That's what you know, how can we be the best person that we can be?
Mm-hmm.
And to be the best friend or the best sister, the best whatever it is. If you have a friend that is experiencing these issues in a big way,
mm-hmm.
you know, that's something to be open and communicate about and ask questions about. Like I said before, never assume what someone is feeling or why they're feeling it.
Yeah.
But I think in many ways we can all relate to that feeling of being stereotyped a certain way. You know, I used to say sometimes I get the big ice cream cone, sometimes I get the small ice cream cone. It depends where that person on the other side is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it depends. So everything is so. I think there are the bigger issues going on with the police force and that type of a thing, but. Then we have, you know, also that's happening are the school shootings, and that's not racist based, mm-hmm. really. I mean, some of it might be, some here and there.
How some of the shooters are treated, there's definitely, the topic comes up, how different shooters are treated from different races. But it's in there. I mean, who they're targeting, I can't think of a situation, in the mass shootings, I can't think of a situation in who they're targeting where racism has come up, but definitely in how the shooter is profiled and treated, for sure. That's in there. And of course, there's another form of hate that's coming out of these stories too, which is just misogynistic behavior. You know, toxic masculinity is a new phrase that's out there. But it's hate, you know, it's this, it's similar, you know, it's similar. Go ahead.
The good news is.
Yeah. Is there? It's like heavy in here.
Because this is such a low vibration pattern and belief system that we're talking about. What's happening on the planet right now, even though it looks awful in the news and what's happening
it feels pretty awful too.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, but see, sometimes you have to rise above the problems to see the solution. Yeah. So if the problem has a certain vibration, we have to raise our vibration above it to see the solution. And the light is winning, you know, to be like Star Wars. The light is winning on the planet, and the darker, negative 1% agendas are falling away. They're trying to hold on with their talons at the last, you know, as long as they can. But that's part of what you were talking about before, controlling people. Mm-hmm. Because actually the human race, they were trying to make a slave race and have this 1% own, you know, control the rest of the human population. Yeah. So the slavery isn't just racist, really. It's human-based in a lot of ways if we get into all of the spiritual, metaphysical properties of that.
For sure, if you're still paying student loans, there's all kinds of ways where people are in controlled and in some sort of controlled loop.
Taxes, the laws, so many things don't work for the favor of the good for people. Healthcare system, all of that are meant to keep people, if people understand what's happening with the food or was happening. There are changes being made now in all of these sectors.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what comes up for me in all of this and having this conversation, thank you for being brave enough to talk about it, because it would be much different conversation to have one of my black friends sitting here and talking about it, but which, you know, I think, I mean, it would be a different conversation.
Right.
You know, this to me is like we're going out on a limb here and we're trying, you know. But yeah, we can talk about like generally, you know, there's good stuff and bad stuff happening in the world, but I think as individuals, like you've touched on, like, you know, we have a choice, like to kind of lean into something better, to improve ourselves, and I agree with that, but everybody, like good things and bad things are happening at the same time in each one of us, and I think how we can do better by each other is to say, wherever you are, with whatever's going on, come to me, and I'm not going to tell you to calm down. We're just do what you have to say what you need to say to help me get it. I agree to listen, and vice versa, and then we can move on. Like, so some things, what's not fair, like no way in either one of us would do this, would we say, okay, here's the answer, go do that, you know? The answer is, yes, let's better ourselves, but let's use each other, let's connect with each other to do that. And sometimes that has to get loud, sometimes that has to, you know, there's release an emotion, there's, you know, whatever that process is to get through it, it's cool. Like there's no, you know, I think like to me, and obviously with the show called Relatable, like it's the lack of relating and time that we take to have these conversations and connect with people and really listen to them, and listen no matter if they're angry or sad or, you know, whatever, but like give the gift of
space.
Yeah, yeah.
The other, you know, the other issue is mental health.
Yes.
You know, and a lot of people that don't have a strong family dynamic, and then the education system fails them, and they don't get the treatment that they need, yeah. and so that's an issue as well. So, you know, there are many different aspects with which this is still creating a problem called racism going on in our planet.
Yeah. We're going to move on to another part of the shows, or anything else that you want to say about this before. It's heavy in here, guys, right now. It's heavy.
I don't feel that. No, yeah. I think it's important to have these.
It's good heavy.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah. Yes. I mean, this is what, you know, you're good at, and so thank you for being brave enough to have this conversation.
Thank you. It's, you know, for me, I don't think I'm great at it. I just know that, and I actually think it's good that I'm not great at this, because I want to show people, like, look, even if I'm uncomfortable for a moment, I'm just this uncomfortable in this moment, and I move on, and this is growth in life, and, you know, where you are now should never prevent you from trying something to move forward. And so I often say I'm a vulnerability extremist, because I'm willing to go where I haven't gone before, just to encourage other people to do, because there's no doubt in my mind that the greater divide outside of anything that we could talk about that's, you know, hate-based is people that are willing to grow and evaluate themselves, and, you know, and look at different ways to take in new information, and those that are not. And we need more in this bucket to make change, you know.
And sometimes it's just by being that and not being pedantic. You know, sometimes just being the light shares the light, without, you know, talking about it. Yeah.
Well, being is good. We talk about that a lot on the show, because this woman's in the do mode all the time, and you have to be just sometimes. You have to, you know, just allow yourself to be. All right, so just to switch gears, so I again, we could talk about this for so much more. We just touched the surface, and hopefully what it has done is just encourage people to have their own conversations and ask their own questions, and I'll give you another opportunity to do that in the end. We always issue a social challenge that will be an extension of our conversation. So
great.
We'll do that. Another thing that I like to do on the show is to show that any given time how we're relating can change, the circumstances of how we're relating. The best way that I can do that is just ask an off-topic random question, so we can learn a little bit more about you, and, you know, we just see that different energy is exchanged between us because we're doing this. So here goes. And these are sometimes very silly. The box has a mind of its own. Sometimes it stays right on topic with us. I'm like, damn, box, we needed a break. But we'll see. All right. This is a very long question. Okay, it's going to be silly. This is a silly one, I think. Would it be worse to discover your teen has thrown a kegger in your house, slept with her boyfriend in your bed, or wrecked your car?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, slept with her boyfriend? What? Teen meaning how old? Okay, I'll assume she's 18.
Okay.
And has a very lovely boyfriend and respectful and kind, so
one's
slept with her boyfriend.
Oh, that one's the...
Oh, the worst?
The worst.
Okay, so we'll say...
Teen threw a kegger in the house, or wrecked your car.
Wrecked the car.
Wrecked the car. Depends how bad the damage was to the house, I guess, too, right?
Well, I'm assuming there wasn't.
Okay, wrecked the car. All right, let's do one more. Let's see if the box... Come on, box, let's change. Shift gears here. How many people in this room could beat you at arm wrestling? So just...
Oh, gosh.
There's 4 of us in the room today.
None.
You think you're... You think you could beat all of us?
I could try.
We might be videoing an after show on our tournament of wrestling, arm wrestling.
Just so they know, there's only one guy here, but
I think he could beat you.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll try later.
All right, yeah, there might be an after show on this one. Okay. All right, we're going to switch gears one more time. So another thing that we like to do on the show is what I call Heart Swell, which is just an opportunity for you to pay tribute to someone, acknowledge them, just give somebody a shout out that's made a difference in your life. The reason that I ask guests to do this is I just want to encourage people at all times to have more meaningful dialogue with people and let people know where they stand with you. And so I ask guests to do it to show that, hey, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
And even you just thinking about it, you're smiling. Like, it's a delightful thing to pay someone a compliment, and then they get to get it as well, and you feel good about giving it. So do you have someone in mind? Does someone come up? Okay, great. So look at the camera and tell that person.
Shamita, thank you so much for opening up your home to me and being such a gracious host for these transitional times in my life. It's meant the world to me, and I appreciate it so much, and I'm so grateful. The person that you are and how kind you are and thoughtful, and I see every day how you take responsibility in your own life to be the best person you can be, and I see that, and you're showing it, and you're walking your talk, and I love you, and thank you.
All right. Hope she. I hope she's watching. Okay, well that brings us to the end of the show, but we get to do one more thing. I know, it goes by really fast. We get to do one more thing together, which I mentioned earlier, is I like to issue a social challenge of the week. So, something for people to try, to go try to have a different experience, and something that's related to our topic, obviously. So what was coming up for me earlier, I got like a little flyaway here that's going nowhere. What was coming up for me earlier is maybe another journaling exercise. I think we did one last week too, which around, where do your thoughts on racism come from? So maybe asking, did you ever talk to your parents about it, your grandparents? Did you have an experience? How much does that experience still shape your views today? What do you think? Can you add to that? Does feel like that's a good thing to put out to ask people to do, but any other questions that we could put on there that might be helpful for someone to explore this topic?
How they've experienced it and what they did, how was their process when they did, to look at that, and the conversation that might have ensued after, who and with, and yeah, I think that covers what you said. And
all right, so it's another journaling assignment, guys. We're going to put out some questions about where do your thoughts and viewpoints and experiences come from on the topic of racism. So that brings us to the end of the show. So for this show, I went deep in researching and reading things, and I have a lot of great stuff that I'm going to share in the archives. So this is one show in particularly that when I say, hey, go to the archives on my site and look, there'll be a ton of stuff, including your website, where people can learn more about you. But I mentioned a video earlier that I want to share and some articles. So as you do this journaling assignment, maybe after you get your own thoughts together, read some of these articles that I'm going to share and go, does that challenge me? Did that was that in line with some of the things that I thought? So we'll do that in the archive. So check out the archive. I really appreciate you being here and being brave enough to have this conversation with me. So thank you. And lastly, we have a PSC this week on Thursday. Unfortunately, it's sold out, so we'll put out a new date in June so you guys can actually be in the space. And if you haven't heard me talk about this before, PSE stands for Public Shared Experience. And what we do is we just sit in a circle and get to a point where people can just share very freely. And it always gets a little weird because at some point I ask people to go, I sense, and just look to the person next to them and share whatever comes up. And it's kind of a cool experience what comes up because it just shows that we are connected and that we see things that, we see each other and we see and know things about each other without even trying. You don't have to be a psychic to do it. And the result of that event is people leave feeling really great, like they just got a relational vitamin B shot. So I'll let you know when the next date is, but unfortunately this one is sold out on Thursday. That's it, guys. So thanks for hanging in with us. If you were watching on Facebook, I hope you're having a dialogue there. And if not, talk to us. You can talk to me on Twitter at Love More Now or Relate with Steph on Instagram about some of your thoughts on today's show. And next week, I am actually going to see a person named Rob Bell on Monday night. Rob Bell is a person that used to have a mega church in Michigan and has wrote some books where now the Christian community does not claim him as one of them anymore. And he's a really interesting person. I'm going to see him at a show on Monday night. And then I'm going to unpack what I learned with my friend Katie, who I consider is one of my spiritual guides. And that's going to be our Tuesday show. So tune in for that. As always, I just want everybody to relate with more curiosity. Just try some of these social exercises and just, be more curious with each other. See you next week.